Moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr.
Thank you,
Steiner.
Mr. Weiland. This evening, I have the pleasure of recognizing the careers of some of our finest educators. Through their diligent work, these individuals have left a legacy that has enriched the lives of our students and contributed to the success of our school district. This year, throughout this year, we have had 31 employees retiring, 14 from our professional staff, and 17 support staff. Together, they represent 645 years of expertise and experience in the Mount Lebanon School District. Their devotion and dedication to Mount Lebanon students and community deserves our thanks, appreciation, and best wishes as they retire and move on to the next phase of their lives. As you hear your name called, please come forward and we have a certificate for you. And tonight we only have a few in attendance, but I still think it's important that we read everybody's name and talk about their contributions just very briefly. First, we'll start with Kathy Baca. Kathy started working in February of 1995 as a substitute teacher. During the 1998-99 school year, she worked in the instructional support role as a teacher assistant at Howe Elementary. She was awarded a teaching contract at Howe beginning in 1999. And during her time at Howe, she has taught 4th and 5th grade. She spent 27.25 years with us. So thank you, Kathy. And you can hold your applause. Next is Joe Figura. Joe was hired as a part-time permanent substitute mathematics teacher at the junior high school at the start of the 89-90 school year. During school years 91 to 92 and 92 to 93, he performed part-time and full-time permanent substitute mathematics teacher roles at the high school. He was awarded a mathematics teacher contract position at the high school at the start of the 93 school year. Joe spent 32 years with us. Thomas Jackson. Tom began his service as a part-time mathematics teacher at the high school at the start of the 1994 school year. In addition to that role, he served as an educator in both the Accelerated Elementary Math Program at Foster Elementary and the Computer and Math Labs at the high school. He was awarded a full-time contract in mathematics at the high school the following year and has served the high school math team ever since. He retired on January 17 after 27.25 years. Gwen Cassip joined the district at the start of the 2001 school year as a part-time business, computer, and information technology teacher at the high school. She received a full-time contract the following year and served at the high school for 10 years. She then transferred to Jefferson Middle School at the start of the 2013 school year, where she remained until her retirement at the end of this current year. Gwen will have been with us for 20.75 years. Jason Kukic. Jason has served the entirety of his years of service to the district at Howe Elementary School. Just couldn't get out of kindergarten there. He worked 2 years as a permanent substitute teacher beginning in 1995 and then received a contract teaching position in 1997. Over the years, he has taught 3rd through 6th grade. He retired on January 31st, 2022 after serving 26.25 years in the district. Kathy McLean. Kathy began working at the start of the 1997 school year as a teacher's aide at Lincoln Elementary School. She continued in that role until October 1999, when she transferred to a special education classroom aide assignment. She was awarded a 50% school counselor contract at Lincoln at the beginning of the 2000 school year, and that was increased to full-time status beginning in 2004. She continued her years of service at Lincoln until her retirement at the end of this current school year. Kathy will be with us for 25.25 years. Next, Jen McMullen. Jen served the district as a teacher's aide at Foster Elementary in September of 2005. She transitioned to a permanent substitute first grade teacher assignment at Foster during the 2006 year, and then was awarded a half-time kindergarten contract at the start of the 2007 school year. She transferred to a full-time position at Hoover beginning in 2008, where she taught 2nd and 3rd grades and remained until her retirement on March 4th of 2021 after serving 15.5 years in the district. Jan Mallett. Jan started as a permanent substitute second grade teacher at Howe Elementary School for the 1993 school year. She was awarded the second grade contract position the following year and remained at Howe until a transfer to fifth grade at Jefferson Elementary beginning in 2005. She became an instructional support teacher at Lincoln at the start of the 2014 school year, where she remains until her retirement in June, and Jan will have been with us for 28.75 years. Next, we have Mike Melnick. Mike was hired in March of 2012 as a social studies teacher and head football coach at the high school. Mike served 10 years with the Mount Lebanon District. Then we have Dr. Michelle Murray. Dr. Murray joined the administrative team of Mount Lebanon High School in 2004. She started as a unit principal at the high school, and then she was promoted to the principal position at Howe Elementary School in October of 2010. She has led the Howe team ever since and remains here until her retirement on June 30th. Michelle will be with us for 17.5 years. Mary Purz. Mary, are you here? Oh, great. There we go. She began her service in August of 2002 when she was hired as a permanent substitute kindergarten teacher at Jefferson Elementary School. She continued as a permanent substitute kindergarten teacher for the first semester of 2003 school year in an assignment at Hoover, then stayed on as a long-term substitute instructional support teacher during the latter half of the second semester. She was awarded the IST contract at Hoover at the start of the following year, where she remains until her retirement at the end of the school year, and Mary will have been with us for 19.75 years. Yeah. And she had the energy to join us this evening for this deserved recognition. Next, we have Tom Sharman. Tom joined the district as a substitute teacher in 1995. He was awarded a health and physical education teacher contract assigned to Jefferson Middle School beginning in 1993. He then transferred to Mellon in 2003, where he has taught ever since and remained through his retirement. Tom had 27 years with the Mount Lebanon School District. And next we have Julie Snyder. Julie, are you here? There she is. She began teaching in January 1998 when she was hired as a permanent substitute first grade teacher at Markham. She was awarded a first grade teaching contract at Markham at the start of the 98 school year. She transferred to a part-time kindergarten teacher assignment at Lincoln and then resumed full-time status with a second grade assignment for the following year. She performed on the second grade team until 2015 school year when she transferred to fifth grade assignment. She was awarded a technology education teacher position at Mellon Middle School at the start of 18-19, where she continues until her retirement in June. Julie will be with us for 24.5 years. Congratulations. And then moving on to some support staff who are just as important in the education of our children and really are the glue that holds our district together. First, I'd like to begin with Lynn Brown. Lynn began working as a personal care assistant at Foster Elementary at the start of the 2006 school year. In September of 2007, she became a special education classroom aide at Foster, where she remained until her retirement on July 26, 2021. Lynn was with us for 14.75 years. Gary Bukowski joined our facilities department as a summer maintenance employee in 2017. He remained with the district as a substitute custodian and ultimately earned a full-time position at Mellon Middle School in 2018. Gary spent 4.75 years with us. Kathleen Chavez. Kathleen served as a teacher assistant at the middle and high schools from 1997 through 2000. After a brief hiatus, she returned to the district in 2010 as a health aide at Washington. She transferred to Jefferson Elementary in February of 2011 and remained there until the beginning of becoming a personal care assistant assigned to Mellon Middle School in 2014. She moved to the high school for the 2017 school year, where she remained until her retirement, and Kathleen spent 14.25 years with us. Barbara DeMeo. Barbara joined the district's food service department as a general cafeteria worker at Mellon Middle School in August of 1999. She transferred briefly to Jefferson Middle School during the 2004 school year, but returned to Mellon that spring. She has served at Mellon since and in serving and in prep and cashier stations, and she remains there until her retirement on May 27th, and Barbara spent 22.75 years. Christine Dinger was hired as a personal care assistant at Mellon Middle School at the start of the 2001 school year. She served the district in that role through 2007, 2008. After leaving the district briefly, she returned as a day-to-day substitute teacher in March of 2009. Throughout 2010 to 2016, she held multiple long-term and permanent substitute positions in sixth grade classrooms at Mellon Middle School. She then transitioned to a personal care assistant role at Mellon for the start of the 16-17 school year and continued to perform as a long-term and permanent substitute teacher in various assignments throughout 2017-18. During her years of service to the district, she has also served as a Summer Learning Center extended school year program in both as a paraprofessional and teacher roles. And she will retire from her PCA position at Mellon at the end of this school year, and she has 20.75 years. Monica Hall. Monica joined the district during the 2011 school year as a clerical substitute before being awarded the part-time library clerk position at Washington. She served as a special education classroom aide at the high school, and then she transferred to the guidance office clerk assignment in 2016. She transitioned to the guidance office secretary role in 2021, where she remained until her retirement on April 20th. And Monica spent 10.5 years with us. Judith Kokel. Judith was hired by the district on October 25th, 2004, as a part-time community service coordinator at the high school. She remained in that role for an additional 7.5 years until starting the position of full-time student activities director at the high school on January 2nd. She retired from her position at the high school on February 25th after serving 17.25 years with the district. Next, we have Randy Leach. Randy began working for the district's facility office in March of 1985. When he was hired as a substitute custodian, he was awarded a contract custodial position at the high school in October of 1987 and transferred to the utility grounds worker assignment in 1994, where he remained until his retirement on July 13th of 2021. Randy served 36.25 years with us. Brenda Nascone. Brenda started working in the district in September of 1997 as a lunchroom supervisor at Lincoln. Beginning in 2006, she served multiple support roles at various schools, including Hoover, Washington, Markham, and Lincoln. Next, we have Lawrence Pajak, or Larry. Larry worked as a substitute custodian from April 2004 through December of 2005, when he was awarded a contract custodial position at the high school. He has been a member of the high school's custodial team since and remains there until his retirement at the end of the school year on June 30th. And Larry will be with us for 16.5 years. Congratulations, Larry. And then we have Diane Popek. Diane is here. She joined the Mount Lebanon team in October of 2008 as a member of the clerical support pool. She worked various assignments over the next 2 years until being appointed as the school secretary at Lincoln Elementary School in November of 2010. She continued her service at Lincoln until her retirement effective December 31st, and Diane was with us for 13 years. Next, we have Mona Rice. Mona was hired in the district in 2001. She began as a clerk in the finance office and then moved to be a clerk in the technology department and ultimately serving as the multimedia and data support specialist. And she held that position until October 29th of 2021, and Mona spent 20.25 years with us. Next, we have Jenna Stein. Jenna joined the district in October of 1994 as a lunchroom and playground aide at Howe Elementary School. She was promoted to part-time office in the principal's office at the high school in October the following year. Jen has spent the next 27 years in service to the high school in various clerical support roles, including clerk, unit principal's office, and summer school coordinator, 12-month secretary in the principal's office, and an administrative assistant to the high school principal, and she retired on December 3rd after 27 years in the district. Nate Stitch. Nate was hired by the district in January of 2009 as a substitute custodian. He was appointed as a contract custodian at the high school in September of 2009 of that following year, 2010. During his, no, that's right, 2009. During his 12 years of service on the custodial team, he has worked at the high school, Lincoln, and Hoover. He retired from that position at Hoover in November of 2021, and Nate served 12.75 years. Karen Taylor. There she is. Karen started working in April of 2006 as a substitute cafeteria worker. She began a contract position as a general cafeteria worker at the high school in November of 2009, where she has worked since and remains until her retirement in June 2020. Karen has spent 16 years with the Mount Lebanon School District. Only a couple more, but really important to honor their work here. Patty Verlato. Patty provided clerical support to the district as the instructional clerk at Markham for over 9 years. She was appointed as a part-time human resource secretary in the district central office in January of 2011, and that position increased to full-time status in July of 2019. She retired from her HR position on August 17, 2021, after 19.75 years with the Mount Lebanon district. And then Pam Wagner. Pam began her years of service to the district as a clerical substitute in March of 2000. She was appointed lunchroom supervisor at Howe for the 2000 school year, then transitioned to the cafeteria monitor role at the high school in 2001. She served in that role for 6 years until being named to the new role of campus manager at the start of the 2007 school year. She served on the campus security team at the high school until her retirement on February 17, 2022. And Pam worked for the district for 21.75 years. And finally, and she's not retiring till September, and I'm glad she brought her dad. Her dad doesn't know why she's going to retire, but yes. Carly McGinty. Carly was hired in June 2009 as the high school student activities director, a role that she performed for over 3 years. She then left the district to go to the evil empire to the south, but returned after wising up and came back. Carly, you're missing all this, so I'll have to read. In February 2016, she came back as a unit principal. She will remain in this role until her retirement at the beginning of September. Carly has the unique perspective because she has been a resident, a parent, and an employee, and Carly will have spent 10 years with us. So thank you, Carly McGinty. Yes. Yeah, let's get them all together. I should say, if you listen to those biographies, I mean, just people who worked in every possible position, had the flexibility and the stamina to change positions. And we can't thank them enough for their flexibility and for their dedicated work to the students of Mount Lebanon School District. You know, some of the younger faculty members and staff members have to remember that they are standing on the shoulders of giants, and you are giants. So thank you all for the work that you did for us. You look great. All right, The next short portion of the superintendent's report is a update on superintendent goals, and it's a specific part of that goal that the board and I agreed to conduct a special education program review, which included qualitative and quantitative analysis, and prepare a report on the findings. This evening, Dr. Heather Doyle will give you a brief overview of that external review that was completed, and then the final written presentation will come the beginning of June. So, Dr. Doyle, you have to use that microphone.
All right, well, thanks everyone. So I am today, I'm presenting highlights from the Special Education Program Review. And to begin, on the second slide, you'll see our district philosophy for our special education program. The very first sentence emphasizes that special education is a service and not a place. So we bring services to students where they are, which we want them to be in the general education classroom with their typical peers for the greatest extent that's appropriate. And we provide supplementary aids and services needed to access the general education curriculum to those students. We also have a continuum of services available for students who need more intensive services. So this is our district philosophy, and you'll see within it that the inclusive practices piece and being in the general education environment is very important. So moving on to the next slide, we have what are considered to be the 6 pillars of special education. And these are the foundational principles of the federal special education law, which is IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And all states and all districts are required to uphold these principles, these pillars. The first being free, appropriate public education. That's what's guaranteed to every child with an IEP, every child receiving special education services. And it's provided at public expense under public supervision. It's uniquely designed to meet the individual needs of each eligible child. The IEP is also must be designed for children to be able to meet challenging goals and make more than minimal progress when it comes to those goals. The next pillar would be the appropriate evaluation. We are required to conduct an evaluation for every child who qualifies to receive special education services, looking at all areas of suspected disabilities using a multi-factored, multifaceted approach with a variety of tools and strategies, and also with multiple stakeholders' input included within that evaluation. We're also required to evaluate students at least every 3 years, and at the request of parents, also when we feel that there's data that's needed to inform their programming and services. The third pillar is the individualized education program, the IEP, which really serves as the backbone of special education. It's a plan that is developed and reviewed at least once a year by a team that includes educators, parents, and the student whenever appropriate. It's individualized, so that I is very important in IEP. And the goals must be measurable, and the IEP must offer meaningful progress in the general education curriculum and functional performance. The fourth pillar, least restrictive environment, is really the pillar that is, when we look at inclusion, this is what we're looking at for students with disabilities, LRE. To the maximum extent appropriate, students with disabilities must be educated in the general education environment with their non-disabled peers. If there is a need for more intensive services, then that must be justified in the IEP. And then the fifth pillar would be parent and student participation in decision-making. We have parents that are, parents are a part of the IEP team. They help determine what evaluation data must be collected, and they are decision makers with the rest of the team when it comes to educational placement decisions, transition planning. And we also have students that participate in IEP meetings as they get older, and they are required to participate starting at age 14, which is the age that we really start to look at transition planning. The sixth pillar is the procedural safeguards. These are safeguards to ensure the rights of children with disabilities and their parents and guardians. There are written notices that are required to parents when the school proposes to change or refuses to change programming. Parents are also provided with notices of meetings. There is also a resolution process should there be a disagreement between the parent and the school district. So those are the pillars that we must uphold as a district. And within Pennsylvania, there are several already established accountability structures featured on the next slide for districts across the state in special education. The first being the Special Education Data Report, which is available to the public, and every year that report comes out. It measures performance on what are considered to be annual performance indicators. The indicators, there's actually 14 different indicators that are considered, but several of them focus on disproportionality when it comes to the identification of students with disabilities. Also, when it comes to discipline of students with disabilities, there's an indicator for the timeline with regard to initial evaluations, educational placement, least restrictive environment. We will touch on that again in just a few slides. Performance and the participation in statewide assessments, and also post-secondary outcomes, which speaks to the importance of transition services for students with disabilities. So that's done every year. The second structure that's in place is a special education plan, which is completed every 3 years by every district in the state. It just so happens that our plan is due in July of this year, so it will be available for public review for 28 days. What's in the special education plan is a description of the special education program within the district. So the services that are available, and also we're required to look at the classrooms in which those services take place, to make sure that we have in place the programming and the services that students need, and that we have a full continuum of services available to students. The last one listed there is by far the most comprehensive, the compliance monitoring that occurs every 6 years. Our compliance monitoring, the initial visit was in 2020, and then we wrapped up our correction process, which really we did very well, and our corrections really just consisted of mostly some corrections with paperwork and making sure we're using the correct terms in certain documents. But that was completed in August of 2021. So that happens every 6 years, and it's typically we have the auditors from the state that are in for about a week, and they conduct observations, they conduct interviews, they review files, policies, procedures, documents with regarding special education within the school district to make sure that we are in compliance with, with the state and federal law. There's also an educational benefit review, which is where we look at 3 IEPs from a select group of students to determine, did that student make meaningful, was there an educational benefit? Did they make progress from year to year and in special education? So that's every 6 years, and that's all in addition to this special education program review. This is something that we chose to do as one of Dr. Steinhauer's superintendent goals. There's a brief description on the next slide regarding the review. So this is one of the superintendent goals for this school year. And the purpose of this review is to assess the effectiveness of the program and the alignment to state and national standards, as well as the district's vision and mission statement. We utilize Stuffelbeam's context input process product, the SIP model, which is a common model used for program evaluation that in schools, looking at what should we do, how we do it, are we doing it as planned, and did it work? So moving on to the next slide, you'll see our program review committee. We were very fortunate to be able to partner with Dr. Keith Trahan from the University of Pittsburgh. He's the interim director of the Collaborative for Education and Assessment Capacity. He was the facilitator of this program review and the expert when it comes to program evaluation. I'm also on the program review committee, along with our 2 inclusion specialists, Tina Beer and Mike Hauk. And Dr. Trahan also has a team of doctoral students that were working on the program review as well. On the next slide, you'll see an overview of the methods used as part of the program review. We have included surveys of key stakeholders, focus groups, several focus groups actually with parents of students with disabilities, a review of the district special education data, and that includes things like how we identify students, the demographic of the students in our district who have IEPs, and a review of performance of students with IEPs on state assessments. So on the next slide, you'll see a graph from the special education data report. This is looking at educational environments. This is a piece that really speaks to least restrictive environment and inclusion. If you look to the far left of the slide where it says SE, special education inside the regular class, 80% or more, that indicates that students with disabilities, that's the percentage of students with disabilities who are inside the regular classroom for at least 80% or more of their school day. The light colored bar there is for the LEA, and that's the school district, Mount Lebanon. And then the dark is the state percentage. So we have met that target as far as having students in the regular classroom, general education classroom for, we're at 70.1%. So 70.1% of our students with disabilities are inside the general education classroom for 80% or more of their day. And moving on to the middle set of bars there, or I guess cylinders, we have special education inside the regular classroom less than 40% of the time. So that means that these are students with disabilities who spend the majority of their day outside of the general education classroom. And our percentage is 5.3%, and the state percentage is 9.8%. So that's one that we would that it's actually good to be lower than the state. That's how we meet the benchmark for that. Special education in other settings. This is looking at students who are placed outside of the district. And we are below the state target, which is where we want to be, at 3.5%. And this is data from December 1st, 2020, when I believe the special education data report they're released in June of each year. So we will have the data for December 1st, 2021, most likely in June. And that December 1st date, that's what we consider to be our December count. And that's where the state gathers all this data to compare it and make sure that we're on track and in compliance. On the next slide, you'll see data from the special education data report regarding the race and ethnicity for our students with special education compared to the school district representation. So it's important to note that the district we have not been flagged for any indicators related to disproportionality, which would mean that we're over identifying students in any one subgroup compared to the general population. But as you see, there are some differences, but according to the state guidelines for disproportionality, we are not flagged. So these are all within what's considered to be an acceptable range. But ideally, what we would want would be for the representation in the special education population to mirror that of the school district. And moving on to the next slide, this is a chart that includes the PSSA, the PASA, and Keystone, the state assessments. I know PSSA and Keystone are common terms for those state assessments, but the PASA is the alternate assessment for students who cannot participate in the PSSA. So this chart here looks at the subgroup students with disabilities and the percentage that are considered to be proficient or advanced. Pennsylvania, when the Every Student Succeeds Act began, when they started measuring progress toward ESSA or through ESSA, the long-term goal for Pennsylvania applies to all school districts. So there's one column for each one of the subject areas that presents the percentage within that subject area for each district. And I compared us to all of our comparator districts that are on our student outcomes reports and other reports. There's that column and then another column met goal. And the goal is determined by the state. How that goal is determined is through looking at the baseline for students with disabilities, which was established, I believe, during the 2016-2017 school year. So for English language arts, it was 25.3. So at that point in time across the state, 25.3 of students with disabilities were scoring within the proficient or advanced range. So 25.3%, a quarter of those students. And what the goal of Pennsylvania, the goal that the state has is to reduce by half the statewide percentage of non-proficient students on state assessments. So for the goal, that's where the goals come from. They set that benchmark for the 2029 school year, or 2029-2030, and then they divided it by 13. So every year the goal increases and the bar is raised a bit. So Mount Lebanon did meet the goal in English language arts, math, and science. For English language arts, 59.35% of our students with disabilities scored within the proficient or advanced range. And that score puts us second amongst our comparator districts. For math, 40.13% of our students with disabilities scored proficient or above. That puts us in third place amongst our comparator districts. And then in science, 62.64 of our students scored proficient or above, which is ranks fifth amongst our comparator districts. Moving on to the next slide, we're going to look at the survey results for teachers. The first figure here I feel is very important, and this is higher than what I expected it to be. We gave this survey, we provided this survey to all of our teachers, and the first question on the survey was, have you taught students with disabilities, students with IEPs within the last 3 years? And if you answered yes, then you continued on through the survey questions. If you answered no, then you were done with your survey. 94.7% of our teachers who took this survey, they are currently teaching or have taught students with IEPs within the last 3 years. So while with special education in our district, we're looking at around 13 to 14% of our students, this impacts all teachers. It impacts the entire school building because we have our students included in all settings. So I think that's very important because when you look at like percentages, it seems like a small percentage, but really it impacts all aspects of our district. When asked about educational practices used by teachers, the teachers responded that differentiated instruction was a practice that was most used by them for students, to meet students where they are, to make sure that we're assessing knowledge in a way that makes sense for each student, and also formative assessment so that we are continually checking progress towards mastery on learning objectives. And we're using those assessments to inform our instruction. Moving on to the next slide, we have some more highlights from the survey results from teachers. 71.6% of respondents indicated that they provide an inclusive learning environment for students with IEPs in their classroom. It's important to consider that this survey was also completed by special education teachers, some of which who are providing services in a special education classroom or not an inclusive environment. Also, there are some other situations where teachers would not be necessarily in that percentage of teachers who provide inclusive learning environments. 80.5% of our teachers indicated that increasing social emotional needs of students is a barrier to student success in inclusive classrooms. While this wasn't, I don't think this is a surprise for any of us to see, it's certainly something that needs to be addressed and just further emphasizes the importance of social emotional learning and making sure our teachers are prepared to work with students who have social emotional and behavioral needs. Common planning time was considered to be a barrier in that teachers believe that more common planning time would be beneficial for them. And that would be common planning time between teachers, also between special education teachers and general education teachers. The survey results for students are on the next slide. And this survey was disseminated through email for students grades 6 through 12. 70.9% of students were satisfied with their special education services and supports. 57.9% of students provided positive feedback on their feelings about what they learn in school. So this was a question, and actually a set of questions that looked at they feel that what they learn in school is meaningful to them. And over 50% of students were satisfied with their college and career opportunities. The next slide includes survey results for our support staff, our personal care assistants, and our special education classroom assistants. We provided a checklist of 10 common responsibilities for paraprofessionals, support staff. And of those 10 common responsibilities, we had the respondents select the responsibilities that they perform regularly as part of their job. 96.7% of our paraprofessionals indicated that they provide academic support to students. 90% indicated that they provide behavioral support to students. 88.3% indicated that they assist teachers with classroom management procedures, and 85% indicated that they collect progress monitoring data. And that would be the data that we collect to show that students are making progress on their IEP goals. Planning time was also cited here by our paraprofessionals as being a need. So having time to meet with teachers and plan and problem solve. On the next slide, we delve into our parent guardian survey results. We had 89.2% of our parents and guardians agree or strongly agree that with the statement, "I think my child is getting a good education." Over 84% of students or of parents or guardians agreed or strongly agreed that their child is making progress on their IEP goals. There were 5 statements in the survey related to parent guardians' experience with special education services, and they all showed a positive attitude with overall over 60% agreement with all 5 of those statements. 3 of those statements are featured here. I'm respected as a member of the IEP team. My child spends the right amount of time in the general education classroom. The supports identified in my child's IEP are implemented. And on the next slide, just to break up all the text, I included a pie chart. My school openly supports the inclusion of students with disabilities. So with this statement here, we had over 84% of parents and guardians responding strongly agreed or agreed with that statement. Moving on to the next slide, we have just a few more bullet points regarding the survey for parents and guardians. Over 65% of parents and guardians are satisfied with the academic support their children receive in all of the academic subject areas, with the highest being 75.8% for English language arts. And then over 75% of parents and guardians provided positive feedback on the learning experience statements. And then with social emotional learning, the over 65% of parents, guardians provided positive feedback. On the next slide, you'll see one of those statements, one of those prompts, and then there was a Likert scale, with 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. Participating in special education meets my child's academic needs. So 50% responded with a 5 strongly agree, 31.6% responded with a 4 agree. And then on the next, moving on to the next slide, Special education services provide opportunities to explore common social emotional concerns of students with disabilities. This was again a Likert scale with strongly disagree being a 1 and strongly agree being a 5, and 41.1% of parents strongly agreed with that statement. And 26.6% responded with a 4, which was still on the agree side. But we also had a significant amount that were right there in the middle. So I think that speaks to the fact that we're seeing more complex social emotional concerns for all students, including our students with disabilities. Next, we move on to the results of the parent focus. It says parent focus group, but I know we had several focus groups because we're very fortunate in this community to have parents who value education. And I feel like that is the factor that makes the biggest difference when it comes to the success of our students. We have parents and guardians who really value education. They participate. They want to partner with the school district. And that's what makes all of this work when it comes to special education or general education. So I know we had several parent focus groups because we wanted to make sure that all parents who wanted to participate could participate and provide feedback. And we certainly have some strengths that were mentioned during the focus groups, and also some areas for growth. There's a lot of people dependent. There's a lot of dependence on individual people. You have some teachers who are very well versed in special education when it comes to like general education teachers. You have others who have less experience and are at a different place when it comes to their experience working with students with disabilities. Parents and guardians participating in the focus group indicated that there's many specific educators and supports made the difference. The co-taught classes, that was cited as being something that made a difference. Small group testing for students. Also weekly Google Forms for progress. And those are used, I see those used more so at the secondary level, but again, just being able to provide that instant feedback for families to know how their child is doing and to meaningfully participate in their education. The high school support, really, the student needs to become more of an advocate for themselves, which is what we'd expect over time. But we also, as educators, need to make sure that we're providing students with the supports they need to advocate for themselves. The elementary school, it was indicated in the parent focus group that better with assessment and knowledge of students' academic skill levels. That's not surprising given that at the elementary level, they spend more time with their students, where at the high school, it's common for teachers to have over 100 students in a day. And moving on to the next slide, we have looking at socialization and the social emotional piece. School counselors, the importance of school counselors was mentioned during the parent guardian focus group. Our school counselors provide a lot of support to our students with disabilities. They have lunch bunches, especially because they're not only working with students with IEPs, they're also working with all of the students. So they have lunch bunches where they have students who have disabilities, students who do not have disabilities, and they work on social skills during those groups. Also, they're advocates for our children, and many serve as a key emotional support person, a trusted adult that children can go to if they need a break or if they need that support. specific teachers make the difference. And one quote that's included in here, you can tell that they love what they do and it shows, and that trickles down. And then COVID was most definitely a challenging time and a, a lonely time. I'm certain for families, also for students who do not have those social networks. But as a district, we did try to have our students with special education services in school as much as we could, given the circumstances. So now we're on to the recommendations. The recommendations coming from this program review, we will be reviewing the full report with administrators, faculty, and staff. Common planning time was mentioned several times by our educators as being a need and also something that made a difference. And that's something we will need to look at in terms of how to build that into the schedule and make sure that our educators have time to collaborate. Offer additional opportunities for parent guardian training and networking. Prior to COVID, we did have training, networking occurring that kind of fell to the wayside, but that's definitely something that will be implemented next year. Expanding the use of evidence-based inclusion practices such as differentiation, formative assessment, universal design for learning. It's not just inclusion isn't just something that it's good for everybody. And when it comes to achievement, there's numerous studies that show that students with disabilities do markedly better when they are in the general education classroom. Providing professional development to all of our teachers, support staff, even our administrators regarding meeting the needs of students with disabilities. So much of education is teacher dependent, person dependent, and we need to equip all of our educators with the same knowledge base so that they're prepared to meet the needs of our students. And when it comes to communicating student progress, utilization of things such as Google Forms, any way, communication notebooks home, however, whatever makes sense for the student, whatever makes sense for the family in terms of getting frequent, meaningful feedback to families on a regular basis, in addition to what parents and families do receive quarterly progress reports. But for many of our students, we need progress being reported daily or weekly. Also, ensuring that all of our activities and learning are inclusive for students with special needs. So that includes not just what's happening in the classrooms, but what's happening in terms of community activities or school activities. Sometimes we don't think about, is this accessible for everybody? Or and those are things that we need to be more mindful of, because I know all of us in this community, we're blessed to be in a community where we have a lot of people who care. But with individuals with disabilities, sometimes we don't realize that something isn't accessible to everybody. So those are the recommendations coming from this program review. And thank you for listening.